Am I back? Do you see me? Hmm? Oh, you do. You see me and hear me now. I don't know what happened to... Alright, are we good? Good, we're good. Alright, so I'm not sure what, when exactly I cut out, but basically the point was Plato's not evil, or at least not as clearly evil, because he's figuring things out for the first time, whereas Kant is in a totally different context. He is ending the Enlightenment. And also Kant is an actual third alternative in a way that Plato isn't. Hegel and other descendants of Kant relate to Kant in a different way than Kant relates to Plato. So that's why he's not just, you know, pointed to as just a development of Plato. Or he's given special emphasis. You know, as people just chat amongst themselves more and more, yeah, it is really valuable to @ me if you're going to ask me a question on Discord, so that it highlights it and I can see it. So do that, or else don't blame me if I skip you.
Mein Opa, Sie können Ihre Finger nicht vom Feuer lassen, ne? Aber diesmal verbrennen Sie. You're that fucking American, aren't you? Who killed my hunter Rudy? I must say you're stuck. What have we here? Ja, das hätte uns etwas Zeit erspart.
Ich verstehe diese Symbole nicht.
Oh, Fortuna, so strange and unpredictable. I could just... I feel like I'm a child again, digging for the treasures in the woods. This moment, will put me in the history books amongst the greatest of adventurers.
You'll always be just another Nazi.
Sehen Sie, Schreiner.
Ja, aber es ändert nichts. Bisher konnten Sie weder mich noch General Strasse beeindrucken, Helga.
Meine Güte, Schreiner, Sie sind ein solcher Korrentenkacker. Hier, sehen Sie. Der Code auf König Ottos Karte entspricht genau den Symbolen hier auf diesem Podest. Das ist die Kombination, Sie Idiot! Na bitte.
Sind Sie sicher, dass das richtig ist, Helga?
Ja, nun machen Sie sich nicht gleich ins Hemd, Sie Weicher.
Helga, was ist das?
Oh Gott, gebiotet! Gott, gebiotet! 4 Stunden. Hallo. Du bist also König Ottos kleines Geheimnis, was? Das ist so absichtlich. Aber keine Angst, ich bin jetzt da und ich habe lecker Fleisch für dich mitgebracht. Ja, American Flash.
Ow. Wow, that was annoying. Is there any way to keep it on the same thing without doing a new link? All right. Let's see. So now people hear me and see me. Looks like it.
Na bitte.
It's probably confusing now that you're just seeing this monster show up.
Sehen Sie.
If you missed the last few minutes.
So beherrscht man ein Monster. Ha! Wollen Sie es auch mal versuchen?
Ich gestehe, Helga, ich bin beeindruckt.
Aber
Aber warum hat König Otto dein schönes Gesicht vor der Welt versteckt, hm? Egal. Zeit zum Fressen. Anna, Bicke!
Great. Alright. Now I have to fight this weird thing. Alright, I'm gonna scroll back up and continue answering the questions. I think he's blind. Maybe I can just stand here forever. Alright. Well, I answered that question on Kant twice, so I'm not doing it again. If it's lost to time, so be it. No. I think that should be captured in one of them? Yeah, I think it... Okay, yeah. I think we're good. You just wouldn't have seen it because I answered it before I shared the link. Alright. Do I think that the GRE is a legitimate method of judging a person's ability to perform well in graduate school? Well, I think there's some correlation, but there are two questions there. One is, even if it did, is graduate school what it should be? And second, if graduate school were what it should be, does it measure that? Ugh. I don't know. I'm skeptical. I think it does capture some things. Not sure it gets to the essence of things, but I mean, for instance, I've always been good with words, reading, writing, and I'm always in the 99th, 100th, whatever. I can't remember which one's actually the highest. Is it actually possible to be 100th percentile? Whatever it is. I took the GRE and I was at the very top, and I can validate that in other ways, so if I were going to guess, I mean, that integrates with what I know my abilities are, so clearly it's measuring something accurately, or what it's measuring is related. I mean, it's not an accident that I score highly there. But in general, I think the way tests are... I think tests are really bad. Multiple choice tests are horrible. Ayn Rand talked about this, or someone did, in one of the objectivist periodicals. You know, it starts to become you're trying to get into the mind of the question writer, because so much depends on that, and I've definitely had that experience where you actually become confused. It's you know the answer, but you're just not exactly sure what's being asked. So, and I'm skeptical of IQ tests and all of that, so I think there's some connection, but I'm not an expert in all of that, and I don't trust the people who are supposed to be experts. really sure how you're how you're supposed to just crouch here. Or... Does that work? Let's see. Jeez. Okay, I can tell I'm close to death now. I don't need to be able to to see my actual health. Oh, I can just do that. Okay. Listening to my last podcast, Greg Salmieri came to mind of people who think of objectivist principles intellectually but without emotional integration. Well, I don't want to psychologize, I don't know him, but insofar as I've seen him express emotion, it has his reactions seem to have been corrupted by the mainstream. You know, how people freak out about Nazis but not communists. He seems to have been affected by that same thing. I was listening to something with him and Uran and Ankar a month or so ago, and he's talking about first of all, his main point, it was about the Patreon stuff, and what was of overriding concern to him was that we not make it a moral issue. So, you know, I'm really glad what Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson said about this when they got off of Patreon. I'm glad they didn't make it a moral issue. That was his whole point. So it's all about let's not judge, let's not make anything moral. Okay. But then when he's talking about Trump, he can't resist the urge to put in this... he calls Trump an America hater at some point, which is... like, he squeezes it in. It's weird. It's not really appropriate at the moment, and he doesn't do that with other things, so, again, it's this. So, that's just insofar as I can judge his emotions. What seems to really get him going emotionally are... based on what I have seen him express emotion about, or what gets him going, I don't think he... has a rational... I don't think he has things in proper perspective. Glitch. Just hanging out there. Sheesh. This guy's annoying. I think I'm on the... God damn it. So anyway, yeah, I don't really want to comment on Greg, but he expresses the same kind of his emotional emphasis is in line with the mainstream in a bad way, and you see that the same across the board with a lot of those ARI objectivists. Do I know of any well-known living person who doesn't identify as an objectivist, whose general way of thinking is more in line with objectivist epistemology than how most self-identifying objectivists actually think about things? Well, if you mean... It depends on whether you mean in theory or in practice. I'm just going to answer in practice here, because I don't know of anyone who accepts something like objectivist epistemology in theoretical terms that doesn't identify as an objectivist. But I would say anybody who looks at reality and forms his own independent judgment, anybody who creates his own concepts. I've mentioned Eric Weinstein before. He is like that. Now, he's not an objectivist, and clearly doesn't agree with objectivist epistemology, but in practice, he actually acts it out. He actually does think independently. Not in every sense, but to the extent that he comes up with new ideas and identifies things and creates categories for them, conceptualizes things. You know, another thing I like is... Alright, I'm going to try to blast this guy in the face from right down there. That was my strategy when I went through this the first time. But another instance of this is Giant Bomb. They used to do this more, but they come up with concepts for things that happen in video games. For instance, abilities. Like ability, but T-E-A-S-E at the end. And that's an identification of that, you know, what happens in Metroid Prime or all these games where you start out and you have all the abilities in the prologue, and then something happens and you lose all your abilities and you have to regain them. Call that an abilities, which is great wordplay, but it's also recognizing a phenomenon. And, you know, it's not just accepting the conceptual tools that are out there, the concepts that are out there. It's looking at reality and forming a new organization of reality, a new category, first-handedly. I also heard of one called a wind chime, which is another great bit of wordplay that identifies something that happens. That's more like a Gears of War thing, you know, when you like when you defeat a bunch of enemies and then there will be like a stinger, the game will play like a sound to let you know, okay, you've defeated all the enemies. Or just identifying that concept is what I'm talking about, but the added bonus is that they come up with clever names for them. One was Victory Vive, which is good, but I like Wind Chime best. That is great. So yeah, things like Wind Chime, abilities, just anybody who comes up with... Anybody who thinks independently, which you know, technically speaking, means the most dramatic or substantial form of that would be coming up with new concepts on your own, or at least coming up with concepts that are new to you, independently coming up with concepts. So, but if you're looking for some great thinker, some well-known person who's just really great independent thinker who comes up with good ideas and is consistently rational, I don't know anybody like that. I mean, clearly probably Eric Weinstein would be the closest, but clearly that has not resulted in his coming to right ideas at the highest level. Now that I know I can... This person says, but the U.S. followed the letter of the law set down by the early generation of Americans about non-intervention in World War II. So I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say that Pearl Harbor could have been avoided. Well, that's not true. I mean, yes, we weren't in the war until we were, obviously, but there are all kinds of other ways. Things we said, stances we took. And that's just not true more broadly speaking. We gave up, the avoiding of foreign entanglements long before World War II. If I could live anywhere other than the US, where would you live? Well, I mean, I don't have any reason to think that I could live. I mean, there's no reason to think I couldn't live anywhere else. If you're asking if I had to live somewhere else, which is the only question that makes sense because I wouldn't choose to live anywhere else. Canada, I guess? Because it's closest and closest geographically and probably legally and culturally to the US, and that's what I want. So that's my answer. It's not very interesting, but the question really only makes sense if I really wanted to live somewhere. And it's like, if you had $1 million, what would you do? Well, if I already have $1 million, and I'm already doing what I would do with it. That didn't go as well as last time. I don't think. Do I think people who say we are the universe experiencing itself, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, are essentially just pantheists? No. I mean, I think some of those people are. And Sam Harris's views, for instance, logically lead to pantheism, but I don't think that's inherent in what he's saying. Because he's just saying we are part of the universe. He's not necessarily saying that the whole universe is conscious or every part of it is. Do I believe the term antisocial is usually used to describe the more individualistic and independent people rather than people who don't mind hurting others? Would this mistake be a result of accepting altruism over egoism? Well, yeah, I think that's obviously true. I mean, antisocial seems to be a package deal. Yes, it's if you're independent and also if you are, get pleasure out of hurting people. It combines things that don't actually go together, and obviously this is a result of an altruist perspective. So yeah, I mean, if somebody uses the term antisocial, that's like, I just totally write that off. I throw that away. That doesn't mean anything to me. Or it means that, you are probably judging someone negatively on the basis of something that isn't actually negative, namely independence. Do I think the world is becoming less or more religious in the sense of actually taking mysticism seriously? More religious. People are definitely taking it more seriously. Even just ignore the numbers of, evangelicals or born again or whatever, US. Point is, mysticism as a method is gaining intellectual legitimacy, mainly from Jordan Peterson, but also others. And that has to be what will dominate. I mean, there's no alternative. Either the human race will go extinct, or people will adopt some method for finding their answers. And they're not going to accept reason. At least not in the foreseeable future. So I see the rise of mysticism as inevitable. And you can see it happening. That's why Jordan Peterson is popular. People can't subsist on skepticism forever. And here's somebody coming along offering answers. I mean, Jordan Peterson would never be popular. And I mean, in another time, nobody would care what he's saying. I mean, both in an earlier skeptical time or in a rational time. But it is precisely because we are where we are that somebody like Jordan Peterson is so hugely popular. And yeah, I mean, you see this all over the place. It used to be that you know, being the you know, being an atheist on the internet, that was that's what was, you know, cool or hip. Now you're a neckbeard, fedora, whatever kind of person, and cool people are into Jordan Peterson, and atheism is lame. Maybe this will work. Nope, no ammo. Okay. Alright. I don't know if I'm going to beat this guy today. If I do, it's going to mean I have to come up with some kind of plan. Maybe I should do this. You know, I think I used this thing last time. Looking for any kind of health. Okay. You say, I remember you were talking about the alt-right and how religion is too discredited for it to have any major influence, at least in the West, compared to racism and nihilism. Well, you specifically said, do you think the world is becoming less or more religious in the sense of actually taking mysticism seriously? And yes, in that sense, I believe people are becoming more religious. Although I do still think that, at least for a while, it's still just... I don't think jumping totally on board with religion in the literal sense, even these people like, Jordan Peterson, oh, it's all about psychological significance and everything. I still think that religion in its literal, straightforward sense is too discredited to be a major force anytime soon. But yes, in the sense of taking mysticism seriously, I think it's becoming more popular. But I'm saying anybody who says, yes, I think Jesus literally came back and all of this. That, I think, is too discredited. Are there any people today worth hero worshipping for their accomplishments despite bad philosophical premises? Must one turn to fiction or the past for hero worship? Well, fiction and the past are both good places to turn, but in terms of... well, you say despite bad philosophical premises. I mean, you couldn't fully hero worship somebody who if he manifests those bad philosophical premises in major ways. I mean, you could hero worship Bill Gates to an extent, but that's not really the full thing. I think it was much easier to admire Steve Jobs, to have a sense of reverence toward him, because even in his attitude, he was so much more closer to a real hero as opposed to Bill Gates, who was, altruistic, more obviously altruistic. Yeah, I can't think. Bon Jovi personally, he's probably number one for me in terms of living people that I don't think there's another living human being for whom I have more reverence, whom I admire more. Companies in general, I love Google and Amazon despite my frequent complaints about them. What I hate is their ideology, but still they are creating amazing products. What they do is worthy of awe. Speaking of, in terms of productive, creative achievement, I get a lot of fuel just from contemplating the existence of these places like Google and Amazon. Those aren't individual people, but But I don't know any full real-life hero. First action I take, dead. I don't know if I'll even beat this today. Jeez, it's already been over 2 hours. Well. Anything planned for episode 100? Well, there will be an episode up tomorrow. Did you watch any of the ARI videos with Dave Rubin on happiness? Any plans of a commentary video on any? Yeah, I watched some of them, although I was confused. First, I was surprised that they didn't go up on Rubin's channel. These were, only one of them did, so I guess this was an ARI series. Which, again, is bizarre. I don't know why I understand why you would go on Dave Rubin and have a series like that, doing it on for his show, but they're essentially bringing Rubin onto their show, which is bizarre because Dave Rubin is just awful. I mean, this is just more pandering garbage. So, I did watch some of them. I was following their podcast series where they put up, random lectures, and they were putting those up on there, but then when I realized they consistently delete, they only have up the most 10 recent episodes, which is weird to do for a podcast, but it fits in with ARI's legacy of being bad at everything it does. So I just unsubscribed, and I haven't listened to anything since then. I thought I'd heard all of them. I thought it was a 6 lecture series or something, but I don't know. Yeah, I listened to those, and they were boring and useless. I don't know if they're doing more with Harry Binswanger. The only real value I got was the one Harry Binswanger was on, and even there it wasn't anything I didn't know, but it was just, oh my god, like my heart was, what, like, I can't remember the exact context, but I think Dave Rubin asked, what about getting people into objectivism or whatever, something like that. What do you do with somebody who's read The Fountainhead or doesn't get it or something? But Harry Binswanger said, that's it. We don't want you. If you read The Fountainhead and you don't like what you read, goodbye. We don't want you in our movement. Objectivism is not for you. Go elsewhere. I don't know anybody else besides me who says that anymore. So it was just just refreshing to hear that tone again from an objectivist. So that's the one thing I got of value. There's also another good point you made about that you don't say when somebody says, when somebody's advocating skepticism or whatever, it's not a good start. You don't say, oh, well, why do you, or everything's subjective. Or you could do this with either of them. Everything's subjective. Well, is that subjective? Or you can't know anything. Well, do you know that? He says that's, he used to do that. He doesn't do that anymore. That doesn't get you anywhere. You ask, where did you get that from? Which is much better. The former response is just pure rationalism. It's impractical. It doesn't do anything. think Peacock once called it, you know, it's a nice party trick, but it doesn't do much. What you want to do is not be rationalistic. You want to get across the reality orientation. Where did you get that from in reality? Not does this fit smoothly together in some rationalistic construct. So, you know, asking if the position of subjectivism is itself subjective, that is just useless. And I always found it embarrassing when Rucka emphasizes that. He did that when we talked to that Zarathustra guy. I see him do that in videos all the time, and I mean, whatever, it's not some great sin or anything, but it's always just that is not how you deal with people who say that. So I always cringe when he emphasizes that so much, like this is the unanswerable response to a subjectivist. But again, not really anything I gained. It was just nice to hear somebody make that point. I think there are 3 stages like this. I don't know. Maybe I'll just finish this off the air, but that's kind of silly because if I'm not going to do it on the air, there's no need for me to do it. It's not like I'm doing this for people watching, so if I'm not going to do it on the air, I should just not do it, I guess. You know, I was watching a stream just before doing this stream, and that's really the benefit of having multiple people, because they were doing something just like this. There was a difficult part of a game, but the thing is there were multiple people there. So while he focused on getting through the hard part, they could talk. But here, I'm screwed, because I either talk, in which case I'm not paying attention, and then I lose and we have to keep doing this, or I pay attention to this, and then I'm just not talking and you're just watching me play and not answer questions. So that's what's tricky about being a one-man show. Okay, so this person clarifies what he was saying before about what I did on my last podcast episode, which was use the grammar to talk about speaking clearly and or thinking clearly and speaking your thoughts. Yeah, I mean, the only problem with that is that wasn't the question, and the show is a Q&A show. I mean, I could do that endlessly, just go on and talk about things, but then I would never get around to the questions. This podcast would be a hell of a lot longer if I just talked about everything I thought of. And then the questions would just be little blips inside all of this other sprawling stuff that that came to mind. But I classify those that are dismissive of metaphysics as a form of skepticism. Well, it depends on why they're dismissive of metaphysics, but the people I was referring to, maybe implicitly, but not. I mean, I think it's in many cases that they're afraid of getting it wrong or they don't know what the answer is, not necessarily that they don't think there is an answer. So, no, I don't think skepticism is really related in any non-obvious way to what I was talking about. I mean, there's the obvious connection of just being ignorant, but that's not really skepticism. Do you think the universe had a beginning? If so, why do you think it does? I've never seen matter go out of existence, so I draw the conclusion it always has and will exist. Well, I don't know what you mean by beginning. Do you mean relative to something coming before it? No. It didn't start at some point along a broader background. Because there is no background. There is no before. But as for your matter question, or let's just say whatever form existence takes, you say, well, I haven't seen it go out of existence, so I assume it will exist. That is not the right way to think about that. This is not no. It's not that, well, I haven't ever seen existence cease to exist, so I assume it's going to continue to. It's that existence is all there is. There is no non-existence. There is no such thing as going out of existence, unless you mean certain combinations or forms of things changing. But the elements of existence can't go out of existence, and that doesn't have anything to do with just the fact that, well, we haven't seen it yet. That's like saying, well, I've never seen 2 + 2 = 5 yet, so I just assume it never does. That's that's not how to think about that. Oh, wow. I'm looking at messages from an hour ago. Hmm. What objectivist literature other than Romantic Manifesto is there for art? Well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I mean, there's Peikoff's courses on plays, which has been turned into a book. I'd read that. That's all I can definitely recommend off the top of my head. Are there any good cultural trends? People think it's dead. The stream is dead because I'm just looking at the screen, reading these questions, barely moving. I mean, part of the problem is that people ask me really long, complicated questions, and it's just like I have to, no. It takes time to read them and understand what they're saying. So are there any good cultural trends as opposed to just material improvements that you have noticed? No. The only thing I could... I mean... Unless you want to consider something like Jordan Peterson good, which depends on what perspective you're coming from. I mean, it is an improvement from where we were in a sense, but it's bad in the sense that it's going to lead to some very bad places if that's the alternative that's accepted. But yes, there are some benefits to people starting to not be nihilistic and skeptical about everything. So there's a way in which you can interpret that as an improvement, so you might call that good, I guess. Just judging it in comparison to where we are, but in terms of rational and good and actually moving us to a good place in the long run, I don't know any good trend. Everything good I see is just a result of a past that is dying out. I don't see any upsurge in anything good. All of the trends are bad. All of the new things are bad. I mean, you hear people say sometimes that Aristotle is being taken more seriously. There's an Aristotelian resurgence in academia and the universities. I'm not in academia or the universities, so I don't know, but I'm not heartened by that because it doesn't that's clearly not what's getting into the culture. What's getting into the culture from the universities is all the bad stuff. I mean, it's like Averroes. It's like what happened with Islam. I mean, you can have great philosophers, doesn't matter if they don't get into the culture. So, what is actually being transmitted to the culture from the universities is the question. You can tell me there's a new respect for Aristotle all day long, but that doesn't make any difference if it's not getting into the culture. It clearly isn't. Is there anywhere that you see a new respect for reason? A respect for reason that is the result of something new, new ideas. This is the result of a new trend. I don't see that anywhere. Forgetting this thing. Wow, I did it! I missed that last time. She'll just die on her own if you don't do that. So, that's why I shot her real quick.
You don't understand. You never were in control.
Jesus Christ. Nazi bits fucking everywhere. Here he is.
Fergus.
Come on. Give me a
Oh yes, the art of fiction. Yes, that's a good recommendation too. I forgot about that.
How's the head, Blazkowicz?
How'd you find me?
We got a distress call from Pippa. We found her body.
They got Wesley too, Fergus.
Bloody hell.
Come on, miss. We have to get you out of here.
Yeah, listen, Blazko. We can't change what happened. You did a hell of a job finding that folder. Which means we've got the location of Death's Head's compound. Eh? We bloody got it. Can you believe it?
There's this dream. Something important. It's gone when I wake up. No time for dreams, I guess.
Ah, damn it! Forgot to take a piss before we left. Why didn't you remind me, Blazko?
I look like your babysitter, Fergus?
Fuck it. Almost there. You sure killed that big fucking monster proper, BJ. The biggest one is still out there. This may be our last chance to topple the Nazi Empire. Now it's time to get it done, eh? And the world is counting on us and all that. No pressure! Except for my goddamn bladder.
The monster never dies, no matter how many times you kill it. Just sheds its skin and changes form. I feel the weight of the world pushing me down. I try to carry it nonetheless. One last time. Then I can rest.
When they poured across the border, I was cautioned to surrender. This I could not do. I took my gun and I vanished. I have changed my name so often.
Phew.
I've lost my have many friends, and some of them are with
Would it be wrong to call life a value in the meta-ethical sense? And paraphrasing, life is the standard of value, so if that's the case, then you couldn't call dying for a loved one would be wrong because it would imply that you have put that value higher than your life. You were thinking about that all wrong, but I go into that in the podcast coming up tomorrow a little bit.
She died without a whisper. There were 3 of us this morning. I'm the only one this evening, but I must go on. The frontiers are my prison.
Yep, that's the end of the game. This is just a... This is an expand alone. It's just a... It's a... I think probably half as long as the New Order prequel thing. I'm surprised I beat that boss. I didn't feel like I guess I just wasn't paying too much attention, and I got further than I thought, but... Well, I'm glad to finally be done with this. Next time! BioShock, I think. That's a game all about just wandering around, so it won't be such a big deal when I do that. There. Have I seen Whiplash? No. I know Peacock likes it. I know some other objectivists, or at least one other one, knows about movies, doesn't like it. I haven't seen it. But yeah, I don't understand what that giant monster thing was.
Through the graves, the wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come. Then will come from the shadows.
What I consider a study hangout, like blocking off time for working, studying, and then in scheduled breaks there's time to answer questions or just socialize. Not exactly sure what you mean. Blocking off time for my working and studying, or yours, or... I'm not clear on what you're proposing there. Wow. I did it. I'm the Grand World Wolfenstein Champion. No one can beat me at this game. I don't think there is any multiplayer to any of these games. I mean, the modern ones. Did old Wolfenstein have multiplayer? Not sure. Yeah, so next time, probably BioShock, although I don't think I have I ever actually played what I said I was going to play the time before without it just being a continuation. I think every time I've said I'm going to play something different, I didn't play that thing. Maybe with Just Cause 3 I did? I can't remember. But that's what I'm thinking for now. But I'm not sure. Could be something else. Has your on become less articulate over time? I'm not sure. I do think there's a big problem with his doing a show where he produces like 500 hours of content a week. I think when you train yourself to do that, you just start speaking to fill time. I remember that one... and the one time I actually saw him criticize me, he said, you know, he's, after saying what's wrong with me, oh, I'm obnoxious or whatever, nasty, obnoxious young person, he says, you know, he'll get older and he'll learn. Or he won't. I mean, what does that's nothing. You said nothing. You're just filling up time with words, and I think training yourself to do that by producing so much content, I think that, well, that's bad. Now, I'm not against... There are times where you could legitimately say, well, these are the two alternatives, and if X, then these will be the results, and if non-X, these will be the results, and in either case, we're good. You could do something like that, but he didn't do that. He didn't say he'll either learn, and then he'll be good, or he won't, and then he will lose any influence or something. He just said,